Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are jumping right into something we've all struggled with at some point, the anatomy of a perfect learner. We're going to examine a fascinating analysis from Dr. Andrew Huberman, where he decodes the actual science-backed study habits that can literally transform the pain of learning into guaranteed success. If you've ever felt like your study sessions are an absolute drag, or you're just not retaining what you read, you are in exactly the right place. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The blueprint of top students. 2. Master your time and space. 3. Watch one, teach one. 4. The psychology of effort. And 5. The power of self-testing. All right, starting with section 1, the blueprint of top students, decoding the habits of success. You know the saying, true success leaves clues, right? Well, to establish a baseline here, Huberman highlights this incredible study that looked at nearly 700 medical students. And what's really fantastic about this is that massive sample size. It's huge. Plus, it was split right down the middle, half men, half women. Having 700 data points from literally some of the most rigorous, high-pressure academic environments on the planet, that instantly gives these habits some serious credibility. Now, whenever we look at surveys of top performers, you're probably thinking, wait, do they study this way because they're already the best, or are they the best because they studied this way? We could argue correlation versus causation all day long, but Huberman points out that honestly, it doesn't matter. The real takeaway is that these specific habits consistently show up in top-performing students. It doesn't matter what classes they're taking or where they're at in their overarching learning journey. Bottom line, these habits just work. Moving on to section 2. Master your time and space, the logistics of focus. So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, the logistics of a top student's routine are pretty unyielding. First off, they study alone. Total isolation. They are ruthless about eliminating distractions. Phones are completely put away, and Wi-Fi is shut off unless it's absolutely essential. They literally tell their friends and family, hey, do not contact me. And here's a really key detail you don't want to miss. While they commit to a solid 3 to 4 hours of deep study every day, they don't torture themselves with one massive, agonizing marathon block. No way. They strategically chunk it up into 2 or 3 completely separate sessions. And there is a very real biological reason they manage their time exactly like this, and it all comes down to a little something called adenosine. As Huberman explains, adenosine is this molecule in your brain and body that just keeps building up the longer you're awake. Think of it like a tax on your brain. It literally limits your attentional budget and makes you sleepy. So when you're trying to study, your focus is absolutely a limited, though renewable, resource. By breaking your study time into chunks and actually respecting this biological timer, you're not fighting a losing battle against your own brain chemistry. But here is a massive hack to really optimize that attentional budget. If you study at the exact same regular times every single day, let's say one block early in the morning and another one later in the afternoon, your brain actually entrains to that schedule. Huberman points out that your nervous system literally gets used to locking in and focusing at those specific times, which allows you to absorb the material infinitely better. And the absolute best part? This biological adaptation only takes about 2 to 3 days of consistency to kick in. Just give yourself that tiny transition period, and your brain is going to start doing the heavy lifting for you. Which brings us to section 3. Watch one, teach one. The teacher's advantage. This is where sharing what you know goes from just being a nice thing to do to a literal competitive secret weapon. At Huberman's laboratory, they have this classic mantra for developing true mastery. Step 1, watch one. Step 2, do one. Step 3, teach one. Now, if you're in a super competitive academic environment, spending hours learning something in isolation and then turning around and teaching it to your peers might feel like you're handing them a freebie, right? Like you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. But the data shows the exact opposite. Students who learn the material in isolation and then actively teach it to others in that exact same course, they perform exceedingly well. Seriously, do not be afraid to teach. It builds undeniable mastery. All right, section 4, the psychology of effort. What pulls you through fatigue? Because look, when that adenosine builds up and you just do not want to study anymore, logistics alone won't save you. We all have this fantasy that learning should be easy. Huberman actually jokes about that old Garfield cartoon, you know, the one where Garfield tries to learn by osmosis. He just slaps a heavy book on his head and hopes the information magically sinks right into his brain. There are even those hilarious viral videos of kids physically waving knowledge from an open textbook toward their heads. It's funny, but man, it really highlights our natural human desire to completely avoid mental strain and friction. But here is the stark, heavily peer-reviewed reality we have to face. Effort is the absolute cornerstone of learning. I know nobody wants to hear that, but studying that actually feels painful, challenging, and frustrating, that is precisely the most effective kind of studying. If the information is just kind of washing over you easily, you aren't really learning it. The friction literally is the growth. So how in the world do those top 700 medical students pull themselves through that painful friction day in and day out? Well, when they were asked about their motivation, they didn't just say they wanted a good grade. No, they relied on high-level, aspirational goals. They had these broad, almost abstract beliefs about how their personal success was going to completely change their family's entire life arc. For example, in the study Huberman referenced, some of these brilliant students were learning incredibly complex medical science in a completely foreign language. It was these massive, deeply personal aspirational goals that acted as a bookend to their daily logistics, literally dragging them through the nitty-gritty, exhausting moments of learning. And finally, Section 5, the power of self-testing, the ultimate retention tool. But before I just explain this one to you, I want to pause the explainer for a second and ask you a direct question. Can you name 3 of the tools the most effective students use that we've covered so far today? Go ahead, take a second. Try to actively reach into your brain right now and pull out 3 specific habits from the earlier parts of this explainer. Okay, did you get them? The habits were limiting distractions by putting phones away, isolating to study alone, and teaching others in the same course. And this brilliantly illustrates our final concept. By forcing you to pause and actually retrieve that information, I wasn't just checking if you were paying attention. I was actually making you do the very thing that cements learning in your brain. That sudden, slightly annoying little pop quiz, that is the absolute core of self-testing. In the peer-reviewed literature, we constantly see a massive misconception about this. Traditionally, we view testing just as a way to evaluate, using exams just to grade what we already know. But testing to build and retain is an entirely different beast. Testing is actually the single best way to actively build knowledge and offset forgetting. When you test yourself, you aren't just measuring a memory. You are fundamentally strengthening the actual neural circuits that hold it. Which brings us to our final provocative thought for today's explainer. As you take a hard look at your own habits, ask yourself, are you just evaluating your knowledge at the end of a semester? Or are you actively testing yourself every single day to build it? The blueprint of a perfect learner isn't magic, folks. It's managing your biological time, pushing through painful effort, teaching others, and relentlessly testing yourself. So try implementing just one of these tactics in your very next study session and watch how it completely transforms your results. Keep applying these strategies and keep learning.